Leaked audio from big pharma executives is showing that they possibly knew all about the C-19 virus way before 2020. Now, this is reminiscent of how Bill Gates was aware of the coronavirus back in 2015. This further proves that they may all have been planning this from the very beginning. And it plays perfectly into what the World Economic Forum wants for the world, for people to be obedient and just do as they're told. And we have to admit that during the health crisis, there were a lot of people who would listen to mandates without even questioning the science that was being presented. Official records show that more than 1.1 million Americans died due to COVID just in the past few years alone. But that number is greatly underreported as it doesn't include excess deaths. So a new study has shown that the official tally is off by at least 16%. So that would be around like 200,000, which means that there's at least 1.3 million deaths across the country that could be attributed to COVID. And then some argue that this is still smaller than reality. But what does this prove? It proves that this virus took so many people from us, some of which still had their whole lives ahead of them. This is what makes this leaked audio that much more important. Now, before I even share this with you guys, all I ask is that you take a second, drop a quick like for the video. I totally appreciate that. And I just want to thank you guys so much for always sharing these videos. You guys are amazing. So this was reported by Sasha Latypova on her Substack account. She begins by recalling the date, February 4th, 2020. This is when a phone call was made to the Department of Defense. So the call was made to pharma companies that were participating in the DoD Pandemic Preparedness Consortium. What was the message in this call? The message was that the novel COVID virus posed national security threats, which by her words looked to be the go signal to go ahead and let the virus loose. Now, we know that they've done everything in their power to try and convince us that this was a natural virus evolution, right? We've heard anything from bats to monkeys and all this other stuff, right? That it didn't leak or was created from a lab. But the reality is that the data does not agree with them. We know that the NIH under Dr. Anthony Fauci funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China, a fact that they still deny to this day. They even went so far as to change the entire meaning of gain-of-function so as to be able to say that this wasn't made in a lab. There was also the matter of Mike Pompeo's slip-up during a White House press conference when he likened the C-19 outbreak to a live exercise. This caused the then President Donald Trump to tell Pompeo that he should have told them about this, which means that they kept the president in the dark about this entire plan. A live exercise is basically a military exercise in which live ammo is used instead of just blanks. Now you can see this video up here on YouTube because it just caused so much controversy back then.
Then, Mr. President, the other question I have for you, when...
Excuse me, we'll do it in a second. Let Mike,
may I just add one more thing? There's been some discussion about China and what they knew and when they knew it, and I've been very critical. We need to know immediately. The world is entitled to know. The Chinese government was the first to know of this risk to the world, and that puts a special obligation to make sure that the data gets to our scientists, our professionals. This is not about retribution. This matters going forward. We're in a live exercise here. We're in a live exercise here. We're in a live exercise here to get this right. We need to make sure that even today, the data sets that are available to every country, including data sets that are available to the Chinese Communist Party, are made available to the whole world.
Ask you both if that's all right. Mr. Secretary, Senator Johnson has suggested that you and the administration may be overreacting. He said, we don't shut down our economy because tens of thousands of people die on the highways. We don't shut down our economies because tens of thousands of people die from the common flu. At worst, 3.4% of Americans will die from this virus, he said. What do you say to people that have that view? That's 11 million people he's talking about.
Well, I can just say the entire world is agreeing with us because they all have their choice, and everybody's doing the exact same thing. We want to shut it out, and we can do that, and we'll see what happens in 2 weeks and 3 weeks. But if we can save thousands of lives and even millions of lives potentially, you don't know where it goes, but you could be talking about millions of lives. So
the audio also confirms that the DoD Pandemic Pharma Consortium was established back in 2017. That was a good 3 years before we were even worried about the whole C-19 virus. In fact, the executives of AstraZeneca can be heard talking about this plan and how it seemed like science fiction, because the premise was was that there was a very small window between discovering the new virus and making drugs specifically for them. And yes, I'm talking about the vaccines that were mandated to billions of people across the world. The timestamp from discovery to the creation of drugs, they were set to just 60 short days. Experts argue that 6 months between the two would still be risky, which means that they probably fast-tracked this without even going through the proper parameters. This is unless they already had previous research that focused on this particular virus. And speaking of science fiction, we've had the message of a possible pandemic preached to us for the longest time, right? It's been provided to us by none other than Hollywood. We had movies like Outbreak back in 1995, which was actually a very good movie if you guys haven't checked it out. Contagion in 2011, another very good movie. One that was set in South Korea called Flu back in 2013. We also had Quarantine that was released in 2008. That was another good one. And a lot of other movies that basically put fear in our hearts. It was like many of us were almost pre-programmed to respond to a pandemic with fear. And so this opens up the argument that they've had this in the chamber for some time now. All they needed was the perfect time to spring it loose. So going back to the timeline, the audio confirms that Big Pharma would probably need at least 6 years to produce a vaccine for a virus.
Professor who has been the architect of the long-acting antibody against COVID-19. Mark, back to you.
Excellent. So thank you for the introduction, Mark, and it's really a pleasure to share with all of you a little bit of the journey that the long-acting antibody team has taken in 2020. But actually, our story begins back in 2017 in the basement of a Quality Inn in Tysons Corner, Virginia, at a Defense Department Industry Day. There I met Colonel Matt Hepburn, who was actually the architect of the Pandemic Prevention Program, or P3. And the goal of P3 was to go from discovering a novel virus to producing a drug in less than 60 days, something that would normally take 6 years at best.
But since they've already been talking about this since 2017, the movement from discovery to drug was that much faster. There's also another point in the audio clip that I wanted to highlight to you guys. It's one that I believe that everybody around the world should know about. And that is that these executives knew for a fact that there were people who should not have been vaccinated. They said that those with an immune disease, lupus, or some other immune conditions should not be vaccinated or at least provided with the vaccines, even those with multiple sclerosis. However, this message did not resonate when the jabs were being spread out across the world. For many of us, the message was clear. It's either you got vaccinated or you were part of the problem. Now, for Big Pharma, this was probably all about the money. They made billions of dollars during the pandemic. And to be perfectly honest, none of us got a jab for free because those were all paid for by our taxpayer dollars, which probably means that this entire consortium was created in the event that a virus did emerge. To make matters worse, these pharma companies were provided immunity. So even if we know for a fact that these drugs were not safe, they would still be protected due to the nature of the global pandemic. And since we're talking about this virus, we can't avoid talking about the World Economic Forum. It was in July 2020 when the group's founder, Klaus Schwab, together with Darrell Malaret, they released a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. In the book, the WEF already had an understanding of what was going to happen in the future. So there was a part here where Schwab and Malaret assessed the impact of the pandemic on 5 very important macro categories. So these would be economic, societal, geopolitical, environmental, and technological factors. Looking back, these 5 categories have been dramatically affected by the C-19 virus, which means that they hit the target right in the middle with this book. It was also during this time when people across the world were kind of being told to listen to both the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum. We're aware that the WEF is very much interested in controlling people across the globe. They've talked about replacing meat with bugs. They've dabbled with the 15-minute cities. They've also gone so far as to say that we don't really need cars because they just contribute to climate change. All of these so-called plans raises a question among critics. Is everything going according to their plan? Or did we really just experience a pandemic that happens every century? It's up to you guys to decide on that. Now, on my end, I'm going to do my best to get the information to all of you guys so that you can stay up to date on what's truly going on. Before I go, I want to thank y'all for hanging out. Thank you for liking and sharing these videos, and I'll see you on the next one.